Because I was thinking when you emailed me that question, and I'm just like, man, what crazy experience. And then they started coming up, third grade, and then the relationship in high school, and then college with the hate letters, slid in the door. But then our school started celebrating Martin Luther King Day with no classes, so it was like, I've always been affirmed that we've had support, so I didn't I can never let it hold me back. Like, my parents never said your identity is your skin color. They've never really talked to me about, well, you're black, you got to be careful about this and that. Not one time. They almost didn't even make me aware of it. Mm-hmm. So a lot of it was just action, seeing how my dad interacted when he got pulled over. Yeah. On those road trips, we would get pulled over all the time. I'd wake up and we were pulled over on the side. I'm like, and just go back to sleep. Nothing would happen, but I would sit there in the backseat. I'm always behind them. And my sister and my brother, and we're sitting in the back, and sometimes my grandma will be with us, and we're pulled over. And I wake up, and we're sitting there, and the lights are flashing. And that could have been an experience, but why are we always pulled over every time we go to Pennsylvania? The same route, we're pulled over. But it was never my dad getting pulled out of the car, none of that. Music was down, he'd smile and laugh and do his thing. But it wasn't this many rules. 2 hands on here. Have your spouse reach for it. It wasn't all those rules. He'd lean over, grab, boom, smile, polite. They met at a meeting point, and that's how I interact. I try to already diffuse the situation. And again, should I have to do that every time? It's like, it's scary. My heart is like boom, boom, boom. But music's down, windows are down, and I'm diffusing. I know that officer is just as scared as I am. So I'm going to do my part. My goal is to get home or go to jail in one piece, not prove a point right now. And I think that every single time. So,
but that's amazing to me, because you know how many times I've been pulled over? Maybe twice in the last 20 years, and I've deserved them both. Because I was speeding.
That is the amazing part, because he would just nonchalantly say, well, every time my dad got pulled over, and I'm laughing because I'm like, Mike, you say that like you should expect it, and he's just so fluid about it. He's like, no, like, we knew every time that we visited my aunt and uncle we were going to get pulled over, and it hurts my heart to think that like that's normal, but I think that's why he doesn't feel like he's ever really been jaded, because he's always reacted so positively, and he's learned his dad's demeanor. Like, his dad didn't have to say this is what you do, because he'd had 1.5 million examples of how his dad would make sure to do just the very things. So
right.
And I think that's like the interesting piece, is those are the learned behaviors that maybe a kid doesn't have their dad present, and they don't learn those very things, and it's it's something that you learn by example. But
or they have a dad present who gets angry at it.
Right. Yes. Like, that's when we were watching that man in the airport, and he's like, that little girl could have been Micah, and he's like, if I would have been fighting the police, she would have witnessed that, and then she would have been scared of cops her whole life. He's like, my reaction is my control. And so I'm like, gosh, like, I recognize the white privilege in watching the things that he is constantly saying, we can't do that. Like, things I would do myself. He's like, Carlie, no, like, we can't do that. And I stop, like, you're right. That was white privilege, smacked me right in the face, so.
But what are some of the more shocking things for you in your experience of Mike that you went, I can't believe you have to even think like this?
I think just realizing, like, there's no room to explore. Like, he really has lived in, like, even growing up, like, they lived in the same safe place. Whereas, like, even when we were looking for houses, and he's like, no, because I like that, but it's around that may not like me. And he's like, there's not a lot of black people that are here, or they're not educated possibly enough to, and I'm just baffled. Like, growing up as a white little girl, we could pull over anywhere and drive anywhere. And my dad was notorious for, like, let's explore this. And that is not on his radar at all. Like, you're not going to go out of anywhere that you're familiar with. And so I have to be sensitive to that, because sometimes it is frustrating. So I'm like, that's a life experience. We should do it. And he's like, I need to check it out first. So I would say that more than anything. And realizing when we travel that, you know, Columbus is a nice little bubble, even though there's some ignorant people here. Mm-hmm. We realize in going to small towns, like even when we went to Memphis, he's like, I don't know, I've never been here, but we stayed the course. And he just said, we can't be ignorant to the fact that there are a lot of black people here, but we might not be well received, being that we're an interracial couple. Right. And he has truly made me so aware, more so than anything, that people who are very devout and positive, like black culture, mm-hmm. I'm not well received.
I didn't walk in the room in an interview and be like, I might not get this because I'm black. Not one time. I got challenged more than anything, but it helped me. You know, mm-hmm. most of the interviews that I've had, they're like, wow, you applied for this, but man, I think you can do this. It's going to be extra work, but if you're willing to, my biggest opportunities in my career have came from somebody that saw something in me that I didn't even know I even. And
I try to explain in that same context that the unfortunate part is somebody who interviewed against you who is white will say something to the effect that, oh, they need diversity in that department. Yeah. But I'm saying that's the chirp that I have grown up. That's the narrative that I've heard. And I'm sure you have too. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, mm-hmm. well, don't even apply because they need a black guy or a woman or whatever. But he sees it with a fresh set of eyes. However, on the flip side, I'm kind of like, that's probably not how it was perceived, unfortunately.
I remember watching my first, tough race movie when I was a little kid, and I went to school mad. Well, here we go. I guess now the stuff is coming out, but I couldn't. I shut down. I couldn't talk to people at school. I looked at my friends different, my teachers different, and I think I eventually got over it because they proved me otherwise. But I just couldn't believe like some of the stuff that was happening, and I stopped watching those kind of movies. One in particular that I love and a lot of people talk about. I love just the idea of it. I've never even seen it. And it's called Fruitville Station. It was about the guy that was at the New York subway, and a group of him and his friends. I think it was the night before his bachelor party. They were out, and he never made it home, and did not do anything. I never watched the movie because I was like, there's no way I can watch that. There's just. So it's those kind of things that I try to stay away from, to not set my trigger off, but I know it's real. I know it's out there. But I believe what you feed, and you give energy to, it grows. And that's what we saw, and that's and that's the thing. We just kept seeing this ugly image, and it grew, and the anger, and it's like, boom, it blew up, and so we got to be careful on what we're giving energy to. I had a different talk with my son last week that I will have when he gets his license. So like I told him, just kind of digest it. I know I threw a lot at you, but at the same time, I didn't want to scare him of police officers. He has great relationships with police officers here and now. Mm-hmm. So I didn't show him the video or anything like that. I just showed the image, and that's when it kind of hit. And he said, well, why would they do that? And I said, there's just evil people. Evil mm-hmm. people, he got the wrong job. And he just laid back, at 11 years old, just laid back, and it hit him. And I'm like, oh, shoot. I'm by myself, and I'm like, this is it. And I said, you got any questions? And he's like, I don't know. And I said, are you scared? Yeah, a little bit. I said, well, what are you scared of? And he just didn't know. I said, are you worried about me? Are you worried about Pat? Are you worried about Uncle PJ? Like, he's like, I don't know. And I said, well, this is going to be an ongoing conversation. I know I threw a lot at you. Just think about it. But whenever you need to talk about it, I'm here. Do not hesitate. And so, and then that was kind of it. But I didn't want him scared of the police officers as well, because that's not a healthy relationship either. No. And so, and that's the thing too, is I want him to be open to choose the career and maybe that's it. We need more, you know, black police officers in there and not them getting attacked as well, from our own people.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, why are you doing this? They hurt us. And it's like, we can't do that anymore. We really can't, because we need a voice heard. We need somebody that's going to stand up for us as well when incidents like this happen, or hopefully this will help all of us just come together, because that's really the big picture. Is it's a human decency issue. It's a evil, it's a good versus, light versus darkness kind of issue. A grown man yelling for his mom. If you don't feel that, you're not human. I'm sorry. At that point, it has nothing to do with race. It has to do with human. Like, that is.
It's a human issue. It's a hard issue.
That's insane, And so that's what got me. When I saw that quote, this man was just screaming for his mom and everything hurts, and I'm like, oh my gosh, But then, on the other side of it, I look at his daughter, and she said, my dad changed the world. And so that's the... The good visions, the pictures, is what gets me going more than all that. I mean, I love seeing the videos of the front line of the officers and the front line of the protesters, and they're hugging. I mean, that's what I like to see. That's what gives me goosebumps. That's what gets me going. But, a lot of it's got to just be genuine stuff. And right now it's going to be hard to differentiate that, so I really feel like we just all got to kind of sit back and let this all soak in and, have an action plan.
He called me at work and was like, how much do you think it would cost to buy all the police officers pizza on protest day? I mean, that's just who he is. And he's like, I'm like,
that. They wanted to put a post, and we're like, nah, we don't need it.
But I feel like you take on such a piece of, like, let's be such an example that, like, his first thought was, I need to let these police officers know they're safe with me. And, like, that's who you are. It's not normal. It's wonderful, but that's just how he's wired to think. So I do think it's hard to pull out of you what you've conditioned through mental discipline that is really, truly your reality.
Now it's time to start talking to people, because everybody has been through their own battles, but when you look at the same battles that we're fighting for 400 plus years, it's like eventually we want new problems,
Yeah.
And that's progress. It's progress through transformation, that it's the same exact thing. You're always going to have problems, but I'm tired of dealing with the same exact problems, and so my kids should not have these problems when they're my age. We shouldn't have the same fights. When we should be talking instead of out marching, and that's what I think the elevation does with that. With the rioting and the high anger at first was we tried, with the knee, and it didn't happen. And now we're angry. This is the third one. We had the runner, and then they forgot about the lady in Louisville that was in her own bed, sleep, and shot multiple times, and they were looking for a suspect, and she's dead. And then this. So it's literally within 3 weeks and nothing. And so that's why the explosion. It's like we are dealing with the same stuff. And on top of that, we lost our job. Our grandmas are in the hospitals and from COVID and all this craziness. And we're expected to just sit back. And we can't do it by ourselves. It takes the human race as one.
Yeah.
And that was what was refreshing to me, to see the pictures and the videos of, oh my gosh, there's almost more white people out here than black. And that's what we needed. It's not going to happen with just us out marching. That's not it, So that's what filled my cup. I'm like, okay, this is going to be. I told Carlie, I was like, this is going to be different. This is different. And then it got to the other countries, and then all 50 states are protesting right now. I'm like, oh, this has never happened. This has never happened for the safety of our country, if this doesn't turn out and we don't get convictions, this is going to be ugly. And I'm praying that this is the turn.
What's the best things we could do to help?
It's just action and support. You know, it really, I think that it's going to be a long process, but we have to be all in, and it really is not seeing us differently. It's seeing us as human. How would you treat your best friend, your family member, a distant relative? You know, that's really what it is. We're distant relatives. You know, and that's how I see everyone. I see everyone as distant relatives.
But what did you say the other day? It was profound to me. You said communication. People need to be comfortable to ask questions. Black people need to be comfortable answering questions. Needs to be because divided we have nothing. Like if people are scared and making assumptions, we make no progress. So Black people have to understand there is a level of ignorance, that they need to be approachable. Yes. You know, what could I have done better in that situation to support you? Like any situation where it's unjust in race. We need to be comfortable enough to say hey, what happened back there was wrong. How can I better support you? How can I prevent that? How could I have spoke up?
Right.
But that's really where communication at home happens, communication in your workplace.
It's a lot of your everyday settings is where we need to speak up, you know, at home, your workplace, and then that's going to change. And a lot of these issues are because of home. You know, like we said, you're not born with that in you. You're just not born with that. So something is going on where it triggers, and we don't deal with it, and then we grow up to be, you know, whatever career or position that we're in, and we never dealt with it, and eventually it's going to come out. And now we can't go backward. We have to continue to, you know, kind of work together and be able to talk and listen to each other and understand that the words still are going to come out wrong, but we have to keep in mind, people are trying. Don't dissect every single word.
It's value conversation. That's to talk.
Exactly it. You know, these conversations that we're all having now, we weren't doing this, you know, 90 days ago. You know, so that's the thing. It's okay, that's what we got to look at, the progress, you know. And that's what I think this whole thing is about, is we need more good people to speak up. We need more good officers. We need more politicians. We need the good to shine over all this ugliness and evil that's going on. And that's the picture, you know, so that's what is keeping me going, you know.
And to speak to that, when I came home this week, and you just missed the huge point, but he's like, I remember in school the DARE program and having my favorite police officer, and he's like, I feel like there are little boys that look the way I looked who don't have that now. And so he's been calling the mayor of his hometown, and they're setting up to look at what it's going to look like to get law enforcement back in school systems through the DARE program, to create that community relationship. And I feel like he's drawing from his experiences to say where did this shift for me, or what was impactful. And that to me, I love his heart in that, because he's like, oh, I know my favorite police officer's name to this day. And he's like, that's so important for especially children of every color to know that not every police, that's what's going to create unity. That's what's going to create progress. And we even realize with our kids, their generation is still going to see this. This isn't going to go away in 20 years. Yeah. But progress is the goal. And so it's having books about children and their voices and what they can do. But I think that's what you were alluding to, is people where they're at. You don't need to go start something new. It's being comfortable where you're at, educating yourself. And, you know, I've even had people at work just say to me, do you call them Black? Do you call them people? And I think the hard part is we have to make it okay to ask questions, because that's the only way people will know how to proceed with respect. Yeah. And so I think he has always been, just in his demeanor, so approachable that he will say yeah, I had a great conversation. And he's just so nonchalant about it. And he's like, well, when she just asked me, like, is it okay to say he's a black guy, or should I say he's African American? And like, that is a big looming question for people. And
that's going to be a big one.
And so what's the answer?
And that's going to be hard. That's going to be to be honest,
there's
like,
no
it's
straight
the simple
answer.
things that we're going to overlook that we need to, that's what we got to figure out. For our household, it's black, you know, African American. I remember when that was a check thing on our, you know, ethnicity. I remember when that first got on there in elementary school. I'm like, African American. It was always black, Caucasian, you know, and then African American popped up on there, and I'm like, what? You know, and it seemed like made up, you know, but then I realized, you know.
So
okay,
you were confused as to whether you should check that or not.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, well, I'm not from Africa. I mean, I get it, you know, I get what they're saying, you know, So,
but being that it's not a straight question, he always says, well, it depends on who you're around.
It's going to depend on who you're around.
And their cultural background.
If you see wrong, speak up. And if you're not comfortable, speak up to somebody else that will speak up for you, because I know a lot of that is a big issue. I feel like officers and people of political power and things didn't speak up because they were scared to lose their position. Mm-hmm. They have to just worry about, I don't know, I know that person's wrong, but I'm not putting my neck out there like that. I have a family, and that's what was hurting us. And now that people are uprising, we're looking like, wow, there's way more good people out there now than what I thought.
There's a lot of people in your position that are saying nothing, and that speaks volumes. You know, it's that fear of, I don't want to say anything wrong, but, you know, and like Mike said the other day, it's like, people have to stop being so scared to mess up, because if the intention is good, people can tear you down, but people who know your heart will have your back. And that's where, like, I feel like the church as a community needs to have grace to let people, like he was even saying, her intention was good. You shouldn't have to research things for 9 days to make sure that you can put something out there. Like, your intention is good, your energy is good. Like, if we play and into those things that are distracting from progress, then we're going to get nowhere really fast. And, you know, I just even think moving forward, like, words have so much power, you know, and at the end of the day, like, you can stand up there all day and say, I hope that your friends of every color feel welcome here, but it's how the people in the pew are acting that make that possible. So it's almost making people be accountable for what they're representing and what they're helping to further.
Yeah, and that's another big thing, is that saying that we've all grown up on is, you know, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt. And that's super old now. You know, like, the words are so much more powerful because of the time that we're in, you know, just boom, 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 and so much content, you know, going out. And that's it. And if we say something wrong, you know, because that's going to be a big thing, we want people to talk and ask questions. Something's going to be said wrong, but you will have the opportunity to clean it up and, you know, you state your piece and clarify it better. And that's what we have to allow, is that room to understand that, you know.
You talked about how you go into a situation and you try to assume that there's going to be dissonance, and you try to set yourself up to say, it may not be because I'm black, but it may be, but it may not be. That positivity still comes with a cost as far as the feelings. Tell me how you process the anger, the disappointment, and what triggers that for you.
I would say I try to accept, and I do this, I try to connect the dots and be very hopeful. I think there's good, and I think everything happens for a reason. And I just disconnect. You know, with all this stuff going on, I mean, there's just so much stuff on the social media that's pulling you this way and pulling you that way. And I think, you know, the first messages I received from bunch of friends from high school, new friends we made here in Columbus through church, and it was messages of support. They didn't have to blast it. I mean, they privately messaged, they called, and said, we're here, I'm speechless. I don't know what to say. And I just said, you don't have to prove anything to me. I already knew you were a friend from the beginning, you know, and things like that. And so I had to kind of dial into that core group of individuals, you know, and the clients, you know, and through our business. And it was just connecting with them more and just kind of disconnecting from that and filling my cup before I go out and try to pour out, you know. And so that was really it. And then it also just made me more comfortable in talking about this situation, which has always been kind of dug in and hidden, you know. And I think I'm slowly through this, and I think a lot of people are going to slowly start growing into their more authentic self, because this was something I've always suppressed. I just try to keep separate, you know, from who I am and the business and what I, you know, and things like that. And it's like, this is the opportunity. Everyone's talking about it. This is what I asked for. I wanted to be of a bigger service. And I just think the timing could not be any better with the COVID and slowing the world down. There was a reason, I think, for all of this. Over the 2 to 3 years, that's been but this year was my number one. I said, I'm going in connecting harder with, I've never done morning devotions faithfully until the beginning of 2020. So when COVID hit, I was just it was like a place of peace. And I just looked at it like, okay, this has to have happened it was shocking, but there was just a reason, and I felt it. And my daily devotions kind of in the prayer and diving into that, and then this. And then I'm looking back and I'm like, and I told Carlie, I said, Carlie, just think, this would not have happened. The results, so many people out, it couldn't have happened without, you know, the shutdown. And this was the shake-up. We have to shake up. We got to clear out. We got to expose. All the stuff has been here, and we're shaking it up, and it's coming out now, and it's popping out, and it's sprouting. And it's like, we got to get rid of it, you know.
But don't you think the religious conversations that we've had, just in like the disappointment at people who claim to be Christian, who are so radical and so insensitive, like I had mentioned to him, like, if you weren't a Christian and you were considering and opening your heart to it, if you were to see some groups of people acting in the way and response that they are, claiming to be Christian, that would be a huge turnoff. And I think it's the burden you carry when you say you're a part of something, that you have to accept that the way that you are responding can be someone else's judgment of an entire culture of people. In the same way that you represent a black man, Christians represent Christianity. It can be so disheartening to see people fighting each other within a church group, people from different denominations taking such liberal or radical stances. But I think that's what you're saying, is like having that foundation of your personal faith. It's been unrocked, but it also has been a discussion in our home that, like, you know, and with our kids, just saying, you know, God obviously made people of all colors. We know that our hope is in educating next generations, because we can't clean up historical ignorance other than having a voice to it. But I do think it's important to, in any setting, have inclusion training, diversity discussions. You know, we strategically positioned ourselves where we live because we want our kids to be around kids of every color, of every religion. And we tell them, like, your job is to represent what we believe in. And so I think, you know, being that you're a black man, proudly black, you know, and I think that's important, but also being Christian, he does digest a bit before he proceeds forward, because there's been many instances where he's like, they wanted me in this situation to be the angry black man that everyone thinks that I could be, and that's not godly. You know, you don't impact people being reactive. And so I respect that so much about you.
You said it's been really hurtful and painful what some Christians have said and made it difficult. Are you comfortable talking about that?
Yeah. Mine, I don't even know if he's aware of, is just seeing how somebody who has been in of the faith a long time is taking the stance of, this is what Black people always do. They always act like they're owed something for what their ancestors went through, and what is the word? Restitution.
Yeah.
But they've made examples of, this whole culture of people feels as though they're owed something and they're taking advantage, and they're making comments on the riots as like, here they go again, they're tearing things up. And I've seen people post about they were happy to receive their stimulus check and now they've got to rough things up again. And I'm watching at, people don't realize the power that, each of us have. And I may not be a celebrity but in your own community, you represent your personal brand. And if one day you are inviting someone to Sunday school or to be in the pew next to you, and the next day you're taking such a radical stance, I have a problem with that. I just think that there's a lot to be said for somebody who claims to be a Christian to carry that with pride and to really execute how they react to things, to be an example and a standing invitation to know anybody can approach your religion. So that has been the disappointing piece, and I think we look like toddlers when we fight each other when we're in the same sandbox. So it's okay, like Mike said, if we don't agree, but to have an empathy for maybe why somebody, where I come from is very different from where he came from, but I had an empathy for knowing right from wrong. And I knew coming into this relationship, it would be harder than being in the same, the same race. We know that. But to act like it's not there is not okay either. So I think it's to say I see no color, that's never been the point. We should be celebrating, the colors that God made and the differences we have. And so I am appalled by people that I'm like, man, like my faith was so inspired by people who greeted differences openly. And and you see it in Sunday school, like God's put little gifts and talents inside of you, like what are you going to do with them? And I think as Christians we have to be really careful about making generalized statements in general, saying they or them or Black people. And
I think something that kind of came up yesterday was just the praying. I think I saw someone post and I said, I've prayed for the president, the people around him. I prayed for the individuals and involved in the case. I prayed for the parents, the family of Floyd, and I prayed for everyone involved. And you will hear some Christians say that they did do that, and some Christians are saying no, we shouldn't pray for them. And I get it, because it's like I said, you have to let this really sink in. Can you really forgive? And I think everyone's faith is at a different. My faith is a little bit not as high as an understanding verses and things like that, but I know there's something bigger than us. I know there's something stronger than us, with the higher will. So I'm willing to do what I know in my process right now with my faith is, praying for the people that are involved and giving good energy to those individuals. Just let them have an amazing thought right now that's going to shift everything. Let them get good rest so they're not making decisions out of stress and things like that. And so in that aspect, that was my thing. Some people that are Christian are saying we should not be praying for them right now. I know there's just more hands at play at this, and I'm hoping that those hands have good intentions and praying, and so as I did that, and then boom, I see some of the growth and the changes, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna, this is what I do, this is working for me. It's keeping me peace, it's keeping me, less stress. Every time I question it, I get an answer. within 2 to 3 days, you know, and so that's always been my way to connect. I would say the tenacity of just keep fighting. We've always been hopeful. We've always had high faith. And that was something that was kind of instilled from our ancestors, you know, through the slavery. They always knew something was going to come out of it, whether they were going to be there to see it or not, you know. And so those are the things, the culture traits that I look back on now that we do now in 2020. It started back then. You know, it really did, and so I'm very, very proud of that. And I haven't had a bad experience with police, but these are the things that I contribute to that. And that started with the DARE program. You know, I had a favorite police officer in 3rd grade. Like, what kid has a favorite police officer? You know, and so those are the little things. It's like, man, okay, that worked for me. I love that. All amazing teachers that were incorporated, you know, understood, they taught. So it's those experiences like, okay, I got to figure out a way that I can do my part to recreate that for kids now.
This is my perception of much of white culture, and I think it's still a thing I struggle with. I think even listening this last week has helped me realize, no, things are worse than I thought they were still. I think there's this perception that, you know, all the things that changed in the 60s and 70s and a lot of the stuff even into the 80s as far as some stuff that changed, I think a lot of people think it's a much smaller problem today.
Yeah, we had a black president.
Yeah.
Everything's okay now.
Yeah, but it really is.
Got it.
Right.
Yeah.
But, you know, listening to you, even though you're really positive, but hearing but for me, listening to you going, I would never expect that. I would never think like that. I would never even anticipate. That wouldn't even be a thought. I mean, if I see a trail, the only thing I'm gonna look at is if this is like the highest crime rate in town, then I'm probably not gonna run there.
Right.
But if it's in a halfway decent area of town, I'm gonna go running there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna explore.
Mm-hmm.
You know. And if it's a nice enough trail, I'll just go with a buddy. If it's in the hard part of
Right.
town, you know.
Yeah.
But for you, you're wired differently. So I think even just the way you guys interact on that, as far as what you've seen, how he would, I think people need to experience enough story that makes them go, oh, this happened, that happened, that happened, that happened. I can't believe that happened that much.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like with the jogger? I was like, well, how is he even there running by himself? Like,
and his
like, you need to
response
have
was literally, black guys don't do
I
that
was like,
in
you
white
should.
neighborhoods.
Yeah, I was like, you shouldn't have been by yourself. You know, and I'm like, wow, we need a buddy system now. You know, like, that's really where it got to the point. I was like, and then I look and I'm like, man, well, there is a lot of things I don't do if I don't have somebody there.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm really big on like a buddy system or a group of people, because if something were to happen, I need witnesses.
But I think you're right.
You know,
like
so-
when the curfew was in place, it's like from 10 to 6.
Mm-hmm.
And Sunday night, he said to me, you know, a lot of our normal cops are working downtown, because he, again, knows the same cops he passes every day. And I said, yeah, I think they've shifted around patrol areas right now because of the riots. And he's like, you know what that means? That cop doesn't know me. And immediately I was like, well, it's fine, because I'll follow you to work.
Oh.
And like,
So we always follow each other every morning.
but it's because
We
it's
both
at
leave at the same time,
4:45.
4-something
Like
in the morning.
it could
Yeah.
be like those hours where people up to
Are
mischief,
coming
but we're just
back,
up that
yeah.
early.
Yeah.
But I was like, it's okay, because like I'll follow you. And when I said that to Micah's cheer coach, she goes, that's what people need to hear.
Yeah.
And she's like, you're downplaying what's normal. And that's what's really opened my eyes to like even how dismissive he is with his story.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh no, that, you know, it was never going to work with me and Amy because her parents would have never really accepted me. And I'm like, he just checked it off and moved on. And I'm like, that is so unfair. Like, that has never happened to me. Like,
Yeah.
and it's just realizing that because it's normal to him doesn't mean it's normal at all.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm the one like putting a magnifying glass on it, like, no, this is not okay.